A man becomes imprisoned in a castle that serves as the stronghold of a mysterious count and his seductive women. What will be the end of this story? The night was deep, and the skies over the Carpathian Mountains were covered with dense clouds that hid the pale light of the moon. Arthur, a young lawyer from Hamburg, traveled by carriage through the Carpathian Mountains on a dark and cloudy night, with only the lanterns of the carriage lighting his way. Sent to finalize the purchase of a property in Germany, he felt apprehensive due to the heavy atmosphere of the night. The narrow and treacherous path heightened his anxiety, and the silent coachman did not respond to his questions. Finally, Arthur spotted an imposing castle perched on the edge of a cliff, shrouded in a somber melody created by the wind. The wind howled around the walls, creating a mournful melody that accompanied Arthur's arrival. The main gate, made of wrought iron, stood open, inviting him to enter Count Orlok's domain. The carriage passed through the gates, entering a spacious courtyard covered with smooth stones. The carriage wheels cracked on the ground, and the horses neighed, as if sensing the presence of something unnameable. Arthur stepped down from the carriage, adjusting his coat against the biting cold of the night. He watched with curiosity and apprehension as the coachman, without a word, turned the carriage and left, leaving Arthur alone before the imposing door of the castle. The massive wooden door, adorned with intricate carvings of mythical creatures and battle scenes, seemed almost alive under the faint touch of the lights. Arthur took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the silence around him. Every detail of the environment contributed to the sensation that time had stopped. The night, laden with mysteries and omens, whispered secrets he was not yet ready to hear. And so, standing before the castle door, Arthur waited, his heart beating in a solemn rhythm that resonated with the call of the depths of the Carpathians. Arthur took a deep breath and with a trembling hand knocked on the heavy castle door. The sound echoed deeply, reverberating through the cold stones. He waited, the night's silence enveloping him like a cloak. The seconds seemed to drag on, each longer and tenser than the last. Finally, he heard the sound of footsteps on the other side of the door. The soft noise of shoes against the stone floor approached slowly, increasing Arthur's anticipation and nervousness. The door opened with a prolonged creak, revealing a woman of ethereal beauty with long black hair cascading in soft waves over her shoulders. She wore a white dress that contrasted with the darkness around, highlighting her presence in an almost supernatural way. "Welcome to the castle, Mr. Whitmore," said the woman with a melodious and welcoming voice. "I am Maria. Please, come in." Arthur thanked her, relieved to finally find a friendly reception. He crossed the threshold of the castle, following Maria through a short corridor lit by torches fixed to the stone walls. The corridor was narrow, with Gothic arches and hanging tapestries depicting scenes of ancient battles and somber landscapes. Maria led him to a large room, whose walls were adorned with portraits of stern-looking ancestors and heavy, dark wooden furniture. In the center of the room, a crystal chandelier hung from the vaulted ceiling, reflecting the candlelight in multiple sparkling prisms. The atmosphere was both grand and oppressive, as if the room carried the weight of centuries past. "Please, wait here," Maria said with an enigmatic smile. "Count Orlok will be with you shortly." Arthur nodded, trying to hide the mix of anxiety and curiosity he felt. He watched as Maria left the room, her soft footsteps fading into the corridor. Alone, he allowed himself to look around, absorbing the details of the room and pondering what lay ahead. The large fireplace at the back of the room was lit, casting shadows on the walls. The fire crackled softly, and the pleasant warmth contrasted with the biting cold outside. Arthur walked to one of the armchairs near the fireplace and sat down, feeling the softness of the upholstery and the comfort it provided. As he waited, Arthur's mind wandered through a myriad of thoughts and suppositions. Who was Count Orlok really? What awaited him at this meeting? The deep silence of the castle seemed to have a life of its own, breathing secrets and untold stories. He adjusted his coat and looked at the door through which Maria had left, waiting patiently for the meeting that would mark the beginning of a new and enigmatic phase of his life. Count Orlok's castle, with its imposing and mysterious presence, now seemed more like a silent sentinel, guarding Arthur's next steps into the unknown. A few minutes passes, and Arthur heard a soft, almost imperceptible sound of footsteps descending a spiral staircase in the corner of the large room. He looked up and saw a tall, slender figure emerge from the shadow. Count Orlok descended the steps with slow, deliberate grace, his dark silhouette contrasting with the faint candlelight. The Count approached Arthur, his piercing eyes fixed on the young lawyer. "You must be Arthur Whitmore," Orlok said, his voice deep and resonant, extending a pale, bony hand. "Yes, I am," Arthur replied, shaking the Count's hand. Orlok's hand was cold as marble, but the grip was firm. Orlok then led Arthur to another room. "Please, have a seat," said the Count, pointing to a chair near a large, sturdy table. Arthur complied, placing his document case on the table. The Count sat on the other side, observing him intently. "I am here to handle the sale of a property in Germany, as requested by you," Arthur began, his voice professional but cautious. "An old house that, according to your instructions, should meet your needs." Arthur opened his case, taking out the necessary documents for the real estate transaction. Among the papers, a photo slipped out and fell onto the table. It was a photograph of a young woman with black hair and clear eyes, smiling sweetly. Count Orlok, with a quick and unexpected movement, picked up the photo before Arthur could retrieve it. "And who is this charming lady?" Orlok asked, his voice laden with an almost predatory curiosity. Arthur swallowed hard, but kept his tone firm. "That is my fiancée, Elizabeth. We are to be married in 3 months." The Count's eyes remained fixed on the photo for a prolonged moment, analyzing every detail with a disconcerting intensity. Finally, he returned the photo to Arthur, who carefully put it away. "Elizabeth," murmured the Count, almost as if savoring the name. "Very well, Mr. Arthur. It seems we have all the necessary documents. Allow me a moment to review them." Count Orlok smiled faintly, his eyes glinting. "I am pleased you have come to my castle, Mr. Whitmore. It is important to me that this transaction is carried out precisely and efficiently." Arthur observed the Count with interest. Orlok had a magnetic presence, both fascinating and unsettling. His features were angular, almost sculpted, and there was an aura of unquestionable authority around him. "I hope the journey was not too exhausting," Orlok continued as he settled into a high-backed chair facing Arthur. "It was a long journey, but I am glad to finally be here," Arthur replied, trying to appear confident. "Excellent," said Orlok, a gleam in his eyes. "I appreciate your dedication and effort in coming personally. Now let us discuss the details of the property." As Orlok spoke, Arthur felt a strange combination of relief and unease. The Count seemed genuinely interested and pleased with his presence, but there was something in the atmosphere of the castle and in Orlok himself that kept his senses on alert. Count Orlok and Arthur began to discuss the details of the property sale. The night advanced slowly. After briefly discussing the details of the property, Count Orlok looked at Arthur with a thoughtful expression. "You must be exhausted after the long journey, Mr. Whitmore. You need rest. Feel free to sleep in tomorrow if you wish. Unfortunately, I will be absent during the day, but in the evening we can attend to all the details of the property purchase in Germany." Arthur nodded, grateful for the understanding and hospitality. "Thank you, Count Orlok. A rest would be most welcome." At that moment, Maria, the woman who had welcomed him the previous night, appeared silently at the door of the room. "I will show you to your room, Mr. Whitmore," she said with a calm smile. Arthur followed Maria through shadowy corridors and winding staircases until they reached a cozy room, decorated with antique furniture and a canopy bed. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn, blocking out the moonlight. "If you need anything, do not hesitate to call me," Maria said before leaving. Arthur thanked her, and once alone, changed his clothes and lay down on the soft bed, exhaustion finally taking over him. The silence of the castle was deep but welcoming, and soon he fell into a heavy sleep. In the middle of the night, Arthur was awakened by a disturbing sound. High-pitched, resonant laughter echoed through the stone corridors of the castle. He sat up in bed, trying to identify the origin of the sound, but it was impossible to discern exactly where the laughter was coming from. Feeling a shiver of unease, he covered himself again, trying to push away the disturbing thoughts and go back to sleep. Eventually, fatigue won, and he fell asleep once more. In the morning, upon waking, Arthur found a lavish meal waiting for him in one of the castle's rooms. The table was laden with fresh bread, fruits, cheeses, and cold meats, arranged with unexpected elegance. He ate slowly, enjoying the meal in the tranquil silence of the morning. The afternoon passed in a similar manner. After exploring the castle a bit more and admiring its architecture and decor, Arthur found another meal served for him. The lunch was equally generous, and he felt invigorated, though a slight sense of unease still lingered over him. When night fell, Arthur was met by Maria, who led him back to the great hall. Count Orlok was waiting for him, his imposing figure standing out against the soft glow of the fireplace. They sat down for dinner, an elaborate and delicious meal, before finally turning to business. With meticulous precision, Arthur presented all the necessary documentation for the purchase of the property in Germany. Orlok reviewed each detail carefully, asking pointed questions and showing a keen interest in the process. "I am satisfied with your work, Mr. Whitmore," Orlok said with a cold smile. "You have been extremely efficient and dedicated. This property will be an excellent new home for me." Arthur thanked him, feeling a mix of relief and curiosity. "I am glad to know everything is in order, Count Orlok. I hope the property meets all your needs." "Certainly," Orlok replied. "Now let us finalize the documentation and seal this deal." As Arthur and the Count completed the final details, the young lawyer felt he was successfully fulfilling his mission, but he could not shake the feeling that something deeper and unknown was unfolding in the shadows of the castle. After handling much of the business documentation, Orlok looked at Arthur with a satisfied air. "Mr. Whitmore, I must leave to attend to other private matters. We can continue our conversation tomorrow. Please feel free to explore the castle and rest." Arthur nodded, feeling relieved to have completed most of the work, but also curious about the Count's mysterious engagements. "Thank you, Count Orlok. I will take the opportunity to rest." The Count made a slight bow and left the room, leaving Arthur alone. Deciding to head to his room, Arthur walked through the castle's corridors, his footsteps echoing on the ancient stones. Upon entering his room, he went to the window and pulled back the heavy curtains. The view that revealed itself surprised him, a deep ravine with rocky walls descending abruptly into the shadows. The sight was both impressive and intimidating, a constant reminder of the castle's isolation. After tending to his hygiene, Arthur donned a robe and lay on the bed, trying to relax after an intense day. Fatigue quickly enveloped him, and he fell into a deep sleep. However, it did not seem like much time had passed since Arthur fell asleep when he was suddenly awakened. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dim light of the room. In front of his bed, he saw three women conversing in low voices. Their long, loose hair shone in the faint moonlight coming through the window. Arthur sat up in bed, still groggy from sleep, trying to understand what was happening. The women seemed not to notice his immediate presence, continuing their conversation in whispers. "He seems so innocent," said one of them with an enigmatic smile. "Yes," agreed the second, looking directly at Arthur with eyes that glowed in a supernatural manner. "He doesn't know what awaits him." The third woman, with a more serious demeanor, made a gesture for the others to be silent. "Silence. He is awake." Arthur felt a chill run down his spine. "Who are you?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The three women approached the bed, moving with an almost ethereal grace. One of the women leaned slightly toward him, her eyes shining intensely in the darkness. "We are the guardians of this castle," she said softly, "and you, Mr. Whitmore, are a very special guest." The tension in the room was palpable, and Arthur didn't know what to think or how to react. The woman's words echoed in his mind, filled with mystery and veiled promises. Arthur stood still, his heart pounding, as he watched the three women before him. Each one had stunning beauty, a blonde with golden hair that shone in the moonlight, a brunette with deep and mysterious eyes, and a black woman with sculpted features and an intense gaze. Maria, the woman who had received him at the castle, was not among them. The women seemed very excited, laughing and whispering among themselves. The blonde was the first to speak, a mischievous smile forming on her lips. "I'm so happy with the visit," she said, her melodic voice almost singing. "Yes," agreed the brunette, looking at Arthur with a hungry expression. "We are going to have so much fun tonight." The third woman, the black woman, leaned slightly towards Arthur, her eyes shining with an intensity that made him shudder. "We are going to feast on the young man," she said in a voice that was both seductive and threatening. Arthur felt a wave of confusion and fear. "What is happening?" he asked, trying to understand what these women meant. The three of them moved closer, forming a circle around the bed. "You are a special guest," said the blonde, her hand reaching out to touch Arthur's face. He recoiled instinctively, but there was nowhere to escape. "Don't be afraid," said the brunette, her voice soft as silk. "We will take good care of you." Arthur tried to stand up, but the blonde pushed him back onto the bed with surprising strength. "Relax," she said, smiling almost predatorily. "Everything will be fine." Arthur's eyes darted frantically between the three women, trying to find some logic or sense in the situation. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice trembling. The women laughed, a sound that echoed through the room, mingling with the distant sound of the wind blowing through the ravine. "You will find out soon," said the black woman, with an enigmatic gleam in her eyes. The tension in the air was almost tangible, and Arthur knew he was at the mercy of these enigmatic figures. His survival instinct told him to flee, but something about these women, something supernatural and irresistible, kept him paralyzed. Arthur remained motionless, his mind swirling with questions and fears. The three women continued to converse among themselves, momentarily ignoring his presence. Their voices, soft and hypnotic, filled the room with an air of mystery. "Visitors are not so common at the castle," commented the blonde, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "It's a special occasion when someone arrives here." The brunette nodded, her smile widening. "And this time, we not only have a young man, but also a handsome one. How fortunate for us." The black woman laughed softly, looking at Arthur with a predatory gleam in her eyes. "Yes, he is indeed a find. We will have a lot of fun with him." Arthur felt a chill run down his spine. The way they talked about him, as if he were prey, was disturbing. "Please," he said, trying to remain calm. "I don't understand what's happening. Who are you?" The women turned to him, their gazes fixed and intense. The blonde leaned in slightly, her face just a few inches from his. "We are the inhabitants of this castle," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "We guard its secrets and take care of its visitors." Arthur swallowed hard, feeling even more confused. "What do you want from me?" The brunette laughed, a soft and melodious sound. "We want to enjoy your company," she said enigmatically. Before Arthur could respond, the black woman moved closer, her cold fingers lightly touching his forehead. "Relax," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "You are in good hands." Arthur tried to fight the growing sense of fear and disorientation, but something about these women, their looks and touches, left him strangely hypnotized. He knew he was in an unusual and potentially dangerous situation, but at the same time, a part of him was curious to learn more about these enigmatic beings and the castle that seemed to hold so many secrets. The women continued to surround him, their conversations now whispered and filled with soft laughter. Arthur, feeling increasingly enveloped by the mysterious atmosphere. As the conversations between the three women continued, Arthur noticed that they became more and more agitated. Their movements, once graceful and fluid, were now quick and predatory. He noticed something strange in their smiles. Fangs, large and sharp teeth that gleamed in the dim light of the room. The blonde licked her lips, leaning closer to Arthur. "We can't wait any longer," she said, her voice laden with desire. "He's here, within our reach." The brunette agreed, her eyes fixed on Arthur's neck. "Yes, we need it now. I am hungry." The black woman moved forward, her icy fingers touching Arthur's skin. Come, sisters. He is ours. Arthur tried to pull away, fear tightening his chest. He was about to scream when the bedroom door burst open. Maria, the woman who had received him at the castle, entered the room. Her expression was one of fury. "Enough!" Maria shouted, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "You need to be patient." The three women stepped back, a mix of surprise and frustration on their faces. "But Maria," the blonde began, "he's here. We are hungry." Maria cast a stern look at the women. "Orlok still has business with Arthur. You cannot interfere before the time. Wait for the right moment," the brunette huffed, crossing her arms. "We always have to wait." "How much longer?" "Until Orlok gives permission," Maria replied, her voice firm and authoritative. "Now leave. Leave him alone." The three women exchanged irritated looks, but obeyed. They slowly backed away, casting hungry glances at Arthur before leaving the room. Maria stayed, watching them until they were out of sight. Arthur, still trembling, looked at Maria. What is happening here?" Maria sighed, softening her expression. "I apologize for this, Mr. Whitmore, but you are safe for now. Orlok needs you to conclude the business. Rest now. You will have a long day tomorrow." Arthur nodded slowly, unable to find words to express the whirlwind of emotions he felt. Maria gave him a final look of warning before leaving the room, closing the door behind her. Alone again, Arthur tried to process what had just happened. Maria's words echoed in his mind. Wait for the right moment. He knew he was involved in something much bigger and more dangerous than he could have imagined. Trying to regain some semblance of calm, Arthur lay down again, forcing himself to sleep despite the unease he felt. The following night, Arthur descended to the Great Hall, expecting to continue business with Count Orlok. However, instead of the Count, he found Maria waiting for him, her expression calm yet determined. "Good evening, Mr. Whitmore," said Maria, offering a slight bow. Orlok had to leave to attend to some urgent matters. Arthur frowned, a mix of relief and concern filling his thoughts. "And when will he return?" Maria smiled slightly. "He will be back soon. In the meantime, I am here to assist you with anything you need." Arthur nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. "Very well. Is there anything else I should know?" Maria hesitated for a moment before continuing. "About the three women you encountered last night. Their names are Annalisa, Katerina, and Seraphine. They can be rather impetuous, but they are not at the castle at the moment. They were sent to attend to some tasks, but they will be back soon." Arthur felt a shiver as he recalled the previous night. "They are quite intense," he said, choosing his words carefully. Maria let out a light sigh, seeming to ponder her next words. "Yes, they are. Each has her own story and motives. But do not worry, as long as I am here, I will ensure your safety." Arthur thanked her, but the unease lingered. "Maria, what exactly is happening in this castle? Is there anything else I should know?" She met his gaze, her eyes expressing a complex mix of emotions. "This castle holds many secrets, Mr. Whitmore. Secrets that cannot be easily revealed. But know that Orlok has important plans, and you are part of them. All will be revealed in due time." Arthur felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension. He wanted to know more, but at the same time he feared the answers he might receive. "I understand. I hope we can conclude the business soon." Maria nodded, her expression softening. "Yes, of course. For now, please enjoy the accommodations. If you need anything, I will be nearby." Arthur spent the rest of the evening reflecting on the recent events. Maria's words echoed in his mind, fueling his doubts and speculations. He knew he was involved in something much larger and more complex than a simple real estate transaction. And with each revelation, the mystery of Orlok's castle deepened, drawing him further into the unknown. Arthur was alone in his room, trying to absorb everything Maria had told him. The night outside was silent and cold, and he felt the need to distract himself for a moment. He decided to take a look out the window. As he approached the window and opened the heavy curtains, what he saw made him recoil in horror. Something was moving along the castle wall, climbing smoothly as if defying gravity. Arthur rubbed his eyes, thinking it might just be his imagination or fatigue. But when he looked again, what he saw was undeniable. It was Maria. She was moving along the castle wall like a lizard with sinuous and agile movements. Her dark hair flowed in the night wind as she descended towards the precipice, disappearing from Arthur's view. Arthur stood still, stunned and unable to comprehend what he had just witnessed. He clenched his fist, trying to calm his racing heart. What are these people? He thought, recalling the strange conversations, the intense looks, and the secrets the castle seemed to hold. A wave of fear and curiosity washed over him. He knew there was more than just human beings in this place. There were deep and dark mysteries surrounding all the inhabitants of the castle, including the enigmatic Count Orlok and his followers. Arthur felt an urge to uncover the truth behind these secrets, even if it meant facing the unknown. With his heart still pounding, he stepped away from the window and returned to the bed. But he knew he wouldn't be able to sleep. The image of Maria gliding down the castle wall like a supernatural creature was etched in his mind, fueling his questions and increasing his determination to unravel the mysteries of Orlok's castle. The night had fallen when Arthur heard the distinct sound of footsteps echoing through the castle's corridors. Orlok was back. The Count entered the great hall with a satisfied expression, as if eager to advance with his plans. "Mr. Whitmore?" said Orlok, his voice deep and unmistakable. "We need to address the final details. I am eager to travel to my new home in Germany." Arthur nodded, trying to hide his unease. "Of course, Count Orlok. I will ensure that everything is in order." Orlok smiled, a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Very well, and I want you to know that you will be able to leave the castle in 3 days, now that all the documentation for the property purchase is ready." Arthur felt a mix of relief and worry. 3 days, he thought. Just 3 more days. "Thank you, Count Orlok," Arthur replied, keeping his voice steady. "I will make sure everything is perfectly in order for your journey." As they worked on the remaining details, Arthur couldn't shake the image of Maria descending the castle wall like a supernatural creature. He glanced sideways at Orlok, trying to read any sign of something macabre in the Count. Orlok was impenetrable, his eyes fixed and cold, revealing little about the thoughts passing through his mind. Arthur continued with the work, reviewing the documentation and ensuring everything was as planned. Orlok watched closely, but made no comments beyond what was necessary. When they finally finished, Orlok stood up, indicating the meeting was over. "Very well, Mr. Whitmore. I am satisfied with the progress. Now rest. Soon everything will be resolved." Arthur nodded, gathering the papers and storing them carefully. "Yes, Count. Good night." As he headed back to his room, Arthur couldn't help but feel a shadow of concern and fear. He knew Orlok was more than just an eccentric noble, and the women of the castle were living proof that something much more sinister was at play. But for now, he kept these thoughts to himself, focusing on completing his task and ensuring his own safety. In the silence of the castle, Arthur prepared for another restless night, knowing that time was running out. On another night, the castle was plunged into an oppressive silence. Arthur, unable to sleep, decided to explore the dark corridors a little more. The air was cold and heavy, and the shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, dancing to the rhythm of the flickering candle flames. As he walked, Arthur heard muffled voices coming from one of the rooms. Curious and cautious, he approached, stopping at the slightly open door. He approached cautiously, leaning against the slightly open door. The familiar and disturbing female voices echoed in the room, and he immediately recognized the 3 women who had entered his room on previous nights. Their soft, insidious laughter reverberated, bringing unsettling memories to the surface. "It was a fun night in that little village," said one of them, her voice laden with sinister delight. "We lured our victims into the woods and satisfied our desires without any interference." Arthur felt a chill run down his spine, the horror of the revelation gripping his mind. He continued listening, trying to remain hidden. "Now that Orlok and Maria are traveling to Germany, this castle is ours," said another voice with authority. "Arthur is under our power and cannot leave, even if he wished. Soon he will serve our pleasures." The third woman let out a low, malicious laugh. "Yes, he has no choice. He is trapped here with us, at our mercy." Arthur slowly backed away, his heart pounding uncontrollably. The reality of the situation unfolded in his mind like a nightmare from which he couldn't wake. Count Orlok had left, leaving him in the clutches of these creatures, and now he was truly at their mercy. Retreating through the corridors, Arthur fought against the rising panic. He needed to find a way out, a way to escape this cursed place. Thoughts of Elizabeth, of his future, all seemed to fade in the face of imminent threat. But he knew that despite the terror, he needed to keep a clear head and find a solution. The battle for his freedom and sanity was only just beginning. With his mind swirling with fear and determination, Arthur realized that staying in the castle would mean his end. He wouldn't just be another victim of these monstrous women, but a pawn in their macabre games. The urgency to escape and warn about the danger posed by Count Orlok drove him to act swiftly and courageously. The main door of the castle was always locked, and there seemed to be no visible way out. Back in his room, Arthur looked out of the window overlooking the cliff. The drop was daunting, but the alternative of remaining in the clutches of the creatures was even more terrifying. He knew he needed to escape that night, while the women were distracted. Taking a deep breath, he opened the window and assessed the descent. The castle walls were steep and treacherous, but small ledges and rocks provided a precarious path. With his heart pounding wildly, Arthur began his descent. Each movement was carefully calculated, fingers gripping onto ledges and feet seeking secure footing. The cold wind cut across his face, and the silence of the night was disturbed only by the occasional sound of falling stones into the abyss below. Sliding down the rocks, Arthur felt adrenaline driving every move. Almost at the bottom of the descent, his hands slipped on a loose stone, and he lost his balance. He fell, plummeting down the slope until he hit the stream at the base of the cliff. The icy waters engulfed him, and he was carried away by the swirling currents. Arthur, struggling against the current, felt his strength fading. The intense cold and exhaustion nearly overcame him, but he clung to life with fierce determination. After what seemed like an eternity, the waters gently deposited him on a shore, where he was found by nuns from a Carpathian church. The nuns, alarmed and compassionate, took Arthur to the safety of the church. He was exhausted and injured, but alive. The sisters tended to his wounds and provided shelter and warmth, while Arthur, with his mind finally starting to clear, knew that his struggle was only beginning. He needed to warn about the imminent danger posed by Count Orlok, who was now heading towards Germany. In an isolated port in Transylvania, a cargo ship named Sophia had set sail for Germany. On board, dozens of crates marked with the seal of an estate from the region awaited transportation. The crew, consisting of 16 robust and experienced men, was eager to complete the crossing, but an unsettling atmosphere pervaded the deck. The first few days of the voyage were relatively calm, but a storm swept over the ship as they crossed the Black Sea. The choppy waves and cutting wind were not unfamiliar to the sailors, but something beyond the fury of nature began to unsettle the crew. On the morning of the fourth day, one of the sailors was reported missing. His belongings were intact, but there was no sign of him anywhere. The Captain Harrison and crew conducted an exhaustive search, but all they found was the oppressive silence of the turbulent waters. The following night, 2 more men disappeared mysteriously, and panic began to set in among the sailors. On a rainy night as the ship battled the storm, one of the crew members, Hans, reported seeing the silhouette of a woman on the lower decks. The figure was indistinct, almost ethereal, but her presence was undeniable. He described her with a gleam in his eyes that betrayed both fear and fascination. However, his accounts were quickly dismissed as the delusions of a drunken man, and the empty rum bottles beside him did nothing to help his credibility. "It wasn't the drink I saw, Captain," protested Hans. "I swear on my life there was a woman on the ship." The captain, a pragmatic and skeptical man, noted the incident in the ship's log but paid little heed. However, when the 4th man disappeared the following night, he began to question his own sanity. After days of unbearable tension and suspicious glances among the men, The Sophia finally docked at the port of Hamburg, Germany. The crates were unloaded under the supervision of harbor officials, and an investigation was immediately launched. Reports of disappearances and the ghostly vision of the woman prompted authorities to meticulously inspect the ship and interrogate the remaining crew. The Hamburg newspapers quickly caught wind of the story and published sensational articles about the ghost ship of Transylvania. The headlines drew public curiosity and fear, but the official investigation failed to reach a clear conclusion. The captain, troubled by the events, steadfastly stuck to his factual account, while rumors and speculation spread like wildfire through the city. The disappearances remained a mystery, and the crates, destined for an estate recently acquired by a certain Count Orlok, were finally cleared and sent on their way. In Hamburg, the days following the arrival of the Asterisks were marked by a growing sense of despair and fear. A mysterious illness began spreading through the city, leaving its inhabitants weak and pale. The symptoms were always the same: significant weight loss, extreme weakness, and, after weeks of agony, death. With the epidemic came a plague of rats that infested the streets, alleys, and houses. The rodents became the focus of suspicion, blamed for spreading the disease. However, despite efforts to control the plague, the origin of the illness remained uncertain, and mortality rates rose daily. Reports of a gaunt, menacing-looking man and a woman wandering the alleys began circulating among the citizens. Those who saw them described figures that seemed more like ghosts than living beings, with eyes that gleamed in the darkness and movements as silent as shadows. Elizabeth, anxiously awaiting her fiancé Arthur's return, began to be disturbed by strange visions. At night, she felt an unsettling presence outside her window. Fleeting silhouettes and shadows moving swiftly would startle her awake, her heart pounding in her chest. One night, as the full moon cast its pale light over the city, Elizabeth heard a soft sound coming from her bedroom window. With her heart in her throat, she approached slowly, the candle in her hand trembling slightly. Through the glass, she saw a tall, slender figure with eyes that gleamed menacingly in the darkness. For a terrifying moment, she thought she saw the pale countenance of a man that matched the disturbing descriptions circulating through the city. She quickly stepped back, drawing the curtains shut and murmuring a fervent prayer. The following days were a mix of mounting fear and desperate hope that Arthur would return home soon, bringing some form of relief or explanation. Meanwhile, Count Orlok and Maria, his sinister companion, were already settled in the estate they had acquired. Hamburg, shrouded in a cloud of disease and plague, seemed on the brink of collapse, and whispers about the shadowy figures and the epidemic only intensified. The once vibrant and lively city was now enveloped in shadows, and each night brought new tales of terror and loss. The days in Hamburg grew increasingly darker. Elizabeth, disturbed by her nightly visions and worried about Arthur's silence, finally received a letter from him. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope and read the words her fiancé had written, her heart pounding uncontrollably with each line. Arthur detailed his journey to the Carpathians, the castle of Count Orlok, and the 3 sinister women who inhabited that place. He recounted how he had discovered the true nature of Orlok and his companion Maria, describing them as creatures of darkness. Arthur mentioned he was sick, weakened by the experience, and pleaded with Elizabeth to take care and seek help. Determined to save her beloved and protect her city, Elizabeth sought the help of an occult scholar, Professor Victor Schatten. Victor was a middle-aged man with graying hair and deep-set eyes that seemed to hold centuries of knowledge. He was renowned for his extensive understanding of the supernatural and his ability to deal with dark forces. After hearing Elizabeth's account and reading Arthur's letter, Victor spoke with restrained gravity. Count Orlok is a vampire, a creature of darkness that feeds on the life of others. He can only walk at night and possesses powers beyond human understanding. The women Arthur mentioned are his servants, vampires who obey his will. Elizabeth shivered at the professor's words. "Then, what can I do to stop him?" she asked, her voice trembling. Victor studied her carefully before replying. "There are ways to confront a vampire, but they are risky. We must proceed with caution and wisdom. That same night, as the shadows deepened and silence settled over the city, Elizabeth received an unexpected visitor. Count Orlok appeared in her room, his sinister presence filling the space with a sense of oppression and fear. His gray eyes gleamed with predatory hunger, and he spoke with a soft, menacing voice. "Elizabeth," Orlok began, "I desired you from the moment I saw you in that photograph. Arthur had you with him in the castle, and your image captivated my dark heart. Now you must agree to become one of my brides and travel with me back to Transylvania. If you refuse, this city will perish in death and despair." Elizabeth remained calm, concealing Arthur's letter and any indication that she knew more than she let on. "And if I accept," she asked, her voice steady despite her fear, "what will happen to the city?" Orlok smiled, a gesture that seemed more like a threat than comfort. "The city will be spared, and you will live by my side, eternally young and powerful." Elizabeth, though terrified, knew she needed to buy time for Victor to formulate a plan. "I need time to consider your proposal," she said, trying to sound convincing. Orlok nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on hers. "Very well, but do not delay. My patience has limits. Remember, the lives of many are in your hands." With these words, he vanished into the shadows of the night, leaving Elizabeth alone with her thoughts and the weight of her decision. Knowing Arthur was free from the castle, but still in danger, she prepared to confront the darkness that now threatened to consume them all. Professor Victor Schotten, a sharp-minded man, delved deeper into his investigation into Count Orlok's whereabouts. Armed with Arthur's letter that revealed the vampire had acquired a new property in Germany, Victor focused his attention on this location in hopes of finding a clue. Arriving at the site, an old mansion on the outskirts of Hamburg, Victor found only some of the crates that had been transported by the Sophia. The atmosphere was steeped in a sense of death and decay. He inspected every corner, moving with the precision of a surgeon, until he found one of the crates partially open. Inside it lay Maria, the vampire who had accompanied Orlok. She slept deeply, her countenance expressing an ethereal and dangerous beauty. The sight of her deceptive calm contrasted terribly with the knowledge of her true nature. Victor knew he had to act swiftly. With a steady hand and resolute heart, he withdrew a wooden stake from the bag he carried, and with a precise strike, drove it into Maria's heart. Her body twitched momentarily, then lay still. Without hesitation, Victor completed the ritual, severing the vampire's head and ending her infernal existence. The relief of accomplishment was brief, soon replaced by a new concern. Where was Orlok? As Victor pondered his next move, he knew Orlok wasn't there. The cunning and calculating Count had surely hidden somewhere else, planning his next moves. Victor considered the possible hiding places and the clues left behind. Returning to Elizabeth's home, Victor shared the progress of his investigation with her. "Maria, Orlok's companion, has been destroyed," he said, his eyes shining with a mix of triumph and concern. "But Orlok wasn't at the property. He must be hiding elsewhere, waiting for the right moment to strike." Elizabeth, relieved to know one of the monsters had been defeated, felt the weight of the lingering threat. "We need to find him before he causes more destruction," she asserted, her determination renewed. Victor nodded, knowing time was against them. "Orlok is here, somewhere in Hamburg. We must be diligent and careful. Every clue, every rumor could lead us to him." As they planned their next steps, the shadow of Count Orlok loomed over them, an invisible yet palpable presence whose next move could determine the fate of many. And in the heart of the storm, Elizabeth prepared to confront the darkness threatening to engulf her city and her beloved Arthur. Days passed, and the search for Count Orlok continued unsuccessfully. Meanwhile, the epidemic spread relentlessly through Hamburg, claiming lives and plunging the city into a state of growing despair. Elizabeth, tormented by the shadows and horrors that plagued her city, found herself increasingly anxious and hopeless. It was early morning when Elizabeth, exhausted and drowsy, was awakened by a chilling presence in her room. Orlok was there, his tall and slender figure casting a sinister shadow over her. His eyes gleamed with insatiable hunger as he approached. "Elizabeth," he said, his voice soft as a whisper but laden with authority. "Time has run out. You must give me your answer now. Will you come with me to Transylvania and become one of my brides? If you accept, you must offer your blood so that I can grant you eternal life." Orlok then mentioned that he had disposed of the man who had destroyed Maria just a few hours ago. "He fell down the stairs of his house accidentally," the vampire said with an ironic smile. Professor Victor Shatton was dead, and Elizabeth was now alone against the powerful vampire. Feeling a penetrating chill down her spine, she straightened up in bed, trying to maintain her composure. "Count Orlok," she began, her voice trembling but resolute. "Before I make a decision, I need to understand what this truly means. What will become of me if I accept your offer? What will happen to me and my soul?" Orlok smiled, a cold smile devoid of true joy. "You will become like me, immortal, eternal. You will not age. You will not fall ill. The hunger for blood will be your only need. You will have powers beyond human comprehension and will see centuries pass like days. But yes, your soul will be shrouded in darkness." Elizabeth took a deep breath, absorbing the words. "And Arthur? What will happen to him?" "Arthur," replied Orlok, "will continue to live his life, free from my influence. He will no longer be your concern. His connection to the mortal world will be severed." Elizabeth hesitated, the conflict in her heart evident. "And the city? The epidemic? The plague of rats? Will you keep your promise to spare them?" Orlok nodded slowly. "Yes, the city will be spared. The disease will cease, the rats will disappear. Your acceptance will be Hamburg's salvation." Elizabeth's mind spun with the implications. Immortality at the cost of her soul. Arthur's freedom in exchange for her own eternal servitude. It was an impossible decision, but one she needed to consider carefully. "I need to know more about this life you offer me," she said, trying to buy time. "What will my fate be by your side? Will I be free to do as I please, or will I always be under your control?" Orlok tilted his head slightly, his eyes fixed on hers. "You will have freedom, but you will always be bound to me. We will share our destinies, our existences intertwined in darkness. But do not think of it as a prison, Elizabeth. It is a new beginning, a rebirth." Elizabeth pondered his words, each carrying immense weight. She knew the decision she made that night would forever alter the course of her life and the lives of those around her. Count Orlok waited patiently, knowing the final choice lay in her hands. And so, in the silence of the early morning, Elizabeth faced the darkest of decisions, with the fate of her city and her beloved Arthur hanging in the balance. The tension in Elizabeth's room was palpable. Count Orlok was visibly growing impatient, his gray eyes gleaming with menacing intensity. Despite this, Elizabeth continued to ask questions, trying to stall for time and fully understand the fate that awaited her. "What happens if I refuse?" she asked, her voice trembling yet firm. "What will happen to the city, to Arthur?" Orlok, irritated, responded with a sharper tone. "If you refuse, the city will perish, the disease will continue to spread, and the rat plague will devastate Hamburg. As for Arthur, he will meet a terrible fate. You will be the cause of the destruction of all that you love." Elizabeth took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Orlok's words. She knew he spoke the truth, and it only heightened the despair in her heart. But she still needed more time, more answers. And the other women? Were they also forced to choose between eternal life and the destruction of their loved ones? Orlok scoffed, his patience clearly wearing thin. "They made their choices, and you must make yours now, Elizabeth. My time is precious, and my patience is wearing thin." Elizabeth, despite her growing fear, continued to question Count Orlok, seeking to buy time and better understand her situation. She knew she was dealing with a cunning and dangerous creature, and every word she spoke needed to be carefully calculated. "Why don't you make me your bride by force?" she asked, trying to sound defiant, her voice trembling slightly. "Why do you need my consent?" Orlok's face tightened in an expression of impatience. His eyes, which had once gleamed with predatory hunger, now showed a spark of frustration. "You do not understand, Elizabeth. Turning someone into a vampire against their will results in a rebellious creature, a lost soul that follows its own path, devoid of loyalty and control. To be my bride, you must accept your new life willingly and join me of your own accord. Only then will you truly be mine, sharing my destiny and my powers." Elizabeth pondered his words, feeling a mixture of revulsion and fascination for the Count's twisted logic. "And these other women," she continued, referring to the 4 vampire brides Arthur had mentioned, "did they accept willingly? Did they become your brides in the same way?" Orlok smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Each of them accepted their new life, captivated by the promise of power and immortality. "They are my faithful companions, bound to me by ties you cannot yet comprehend. And you, Elizabeth, will be the most precious of all. Your beauty and spirit are unparalleled." Orlok said he would prefer not curse the city if Elizabeth joined him. Elizabeth felt a wave of disgust course through her body, but she maintained her composure. "And if I accept, what will happen to my human feelings, my memories? Will I still be myself?" Orlok tilted his head, watching her closely. "You will retain your memories and feelings, but they will be transformed. The hunger for blood will become your primary need, but your emotional bonds, your memories, all of that will remain. You will be an elevated version of yourself, eternal and powerful." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with tension. Elizabeth knew she needed more time, but Orlok's patience was wearing thin. Every passing second was crucial. Elizabeth, sensing she was pushing Count Orlok's tolerance to its limit, knew she had to act. She looked at Orlok's pale, hungry face and finally made her decision, not without a last sigh of resignation. "Very well, Count Orlok, I accept. I will go with you to Transylvania and become one of your brides." Orlok smiled, a smile that seemed more like a sinister victory than a gesture of tenderness. Elizabeth lay back on the bed, her heart pounding uncontrollably as she presented her neck to him. The Count approached slowly, his eyes fixed on the pulsating target, predatory hunger gleaming in his pupils. As Orlok leaned over her, Elizabeth closed her eyes, trying to prepare herself for what would come next. Every step he took seemed like an echo of eternity, a harbinger of the dark fate she was about to embrace. And so, in the cold silence of her room, she awaited the moment when her life would change forever, with the fate of Hamburg and Arthur still uncertain. The room was thick with tension as Orlok approached, his eyes gleaming with ancient hunger. Elizabeth, lying on the bed, offered her neck, resigned to the dark fate she had chosen to save her city and her beloved. The silence was total, broken only by the soft sound of her breathing and the rustle of the Count's cape. However, as Orlok leaned in to bite, an almost imperceptible shift occurred in the room. The first rays of dawn began to filter through the curtains, casting a faint golden glow into the room. Orlok, absorbed in his desire, did not immediately notice the growing threat. When the sunlight touched his pale skin, he recoiled instantly, a cry of pain escaping his lips. Elizabeth, surprised and still frightened, realized the Count's vulnerability. Without hesitation, she grabbed his arm tightly, holding him under the rays of sunlight that now flooded the room. "No!" Orlok shouted, struggling against her with desperate strength. "You cannot do this!" Elizabeth felt an unexpected power within herself, a strength fueled by love and the desperation to save all that was dear to her. She kept the Count firmly positioned under the light, ignoring his attempts to break free. The sun's rays penetrated deeper and deeper into Orlok's flesh, and his skin began to burn and fragment. He writhed and screamed, the pain becoming unbearable. Elizabeth closed her eyes tightly, feeling the warmth of the sunlight and the Count's frantic struggle in her arms. Finally, with a final sharp cry, Orlok began to disintegrate into ashes. His form dissolved, fragments of his body being carried away by the wind blowing in through the open window. Exhausted and trembling, Elizabeth released her grip and fell to her knees, watching as the monster completely disintegrated, leaving only a pile of ashes on the floor. The room, once filled with a sense of despair and terror, was now bathed in the morning light. Elizabeth, still shaking, slowly stood up and looked at the pile of ashes at her feet. The Count was dead, destroyed by the sunlight and the courage she had found within herself. Elizabeth, armed with the knowledge she had gained from Professor Victor Schatten, devised a risky plan to end the terror haunting Hamburg. Knowing that Orlok would inevitably appear in her room to demand an answer, she decided to use time to her advantage, keeping the vampire distracted until the first rays of sunlight penetrated the room. With Orlok's death, a strange silence fell over Hamburg. In the days that followed, the epidemic that had plagued the city receded, and the rat infestation disappeared. People, initially bewildered, began to regain their strength, and normalcy slowly returned. Elizabeth, despite the trauma and loss, found solace in the knowledge that her courage had saved the city and possibly the world from an incalculable threat.